Okay, so active noise canceling headphones are starting to heat up, with 2025 seeing the Nothing Headphone 1 and the Sony WH-1000XM6 hitting shelves. But is there a right one for you? Which headphone reigns supreme and why? Let's find out. Alright, going over the design. These are very different headphones, and it's worth going into why they're so different. Nothing took a, well, let's call it unconventional approach to design and gave us a retro-futurist chic with very chunky pieces. The ear cups are somewhat deep, although the ear pads are a little stiff, and the controls are all physical rather than capacitive. On the other hand, the Sony WH-1000XM6 takes a much more conventional approach, something that looks a lot like their original releases, and the physical button plus capacitive surface control interface means that they're not really doing much to upset the apple cart. A lot of these are intuitive, whereas with the Nothing headphones, you have to hunt a bit and get used to something new. Now, I'm not a huge fan of the comfort of either of these headphones, but I'm going to give the edge to the WH-1000XM6 despite the fact that I don't really like it all that much, because the headband offers a lot more padding and a lot more, let's say, it's a lot more conducive to a better fit with those with eyeglasses. While there's nothing wrong per se with the Nothing headphones, it's a sore spot that could get worse over time, whereas the Sony headphones actually address it before it becomes an issue. Now, these headphones both have a slew of connectivity options. The Nothing Headphone 1 is able to connect over Bluetooth 5.3 via SBC, AAC, and LDAC, which is Sony's proprietary lossless codec. Unlike Sony, however, they can hook into your computer via USB-C and deliver audio that way. Very cool. On the other hand, the Sony WH-1000XM6 is able to connect with SBC, AAC, and LDAC, but also they are able to use LC3 and Auracast low-energy Bluetooth options, which is a big plus for different applications later on. This will allow you to do more things in more places, even if it's not quite obvious just yet. Both headphones have a wired 3.5mm TRRS jack, so you can plug into older sources as well if you would like them. So for connectivity, it's a push depending upon what you want, but I'm going to give the edge to Nothing because having more wired listening options is a big plus down the road if you do things like work with your headphones, for example. If you need a wired connection where there is no way you can use Bluetooth or you run out of battery, you're going to need that backup, and the more ways you can get that backup, the better. So, is the Nothing X app better than the Sony Sound Connect app? Well, I guess that depends. Are you the kind of guy who wants to drive a manual or an automatic? The Sony app is really good, well polished, and there's really not much to complain about here. There's a ton of features, but you can go read about that on your own. I'm not going to exhaust you with a huge list of alphabet soup of the things that you can do with each app. However, the main story is that while the Sony Sound Connect app is really good, it's also very simple, and you're not going to be able to do much of anything that's going to make your headphones sound truly terrible that can't be walked back. The Nothing X app, on the other hand, allows you to do pretty much anything with the sound of your headphones. While more complexity is not necessarily a bad thing, and Nothing gives you a lot more control over your sound, it's also a lot harder to do well, and newer users are going to be caught in the deep end without any swimmies. If you don't want to be endlessly tinkering with your headphones, you're going to want to stick with the Sony WH-1000XM6. But if you're more of a tinkerer, then by all means, go for the Nothing Headphone 1. Battery life. This is a pretty convincing win. The Nothing Headphone 1 is able to run through our standardized battery test for over 42 hours and 54 minutes. The Sony, on the other hand, was only able to last 37 hours and 14 minutes. While this is a fairly decisive victory, percentage-wise, this is not really a huge drubbing one way or another. However, if battery life is a common sore spot for you, you're going to have to pick the Nothing Headphone 1 if you want the most. Mic quality. Sony wins. Check out for yourself on the website, but this is not close.
That's it?
Yeah, that's it. There's really nothing else to say.
All right, go to the website, guys.
Yep.
Hear it for yourself.
Yeah. I could wax poetic here about how Sony is better able to handle reverb, echoes, wind, and other noise, but you're just going to have to hear for yourself in order to believe it. Noise canceling. While both headphones are really good and come within a few percentage points of each other when it comes to average loudness reduction, While the Nothing Headphone 1 is not bad in ANC and is in fact really good when you measure it, performance in the real world, however, is a different story. Sony is nigh unbeatable in this arena, having had some of the best ANC products over the last 10 years, and the XM6 is no different. While the Nothing Headphone 1 is able to keep a pretty consistent level of noise reduction all the way down to 20 Hz, Sony runs up the score above 100 Hz in a lot of the sounds that you would hear outside on a day-to-day basis. Because the headphones are able to really bring down the level of noise in the ranges where outside noise typically lives, the edge goes to Sony. Well, here's the big show. Do either of these headphones sound good? Well, I'm not going to say that either sound particularly great, because they don't. Most ANC headphones don't. The Sony, kicks the crap out of the Nothing Headphone 1. I'm not entirely sure what the tuning was trying to do, but the range from 500 Hz to 2 kHz on the Nothing Headphone 1, it's just weird. It leads to all sorts of weird sounding things and like nasally voices and really off-putting instruments. The good news is, though, is that the EQ of the Nothing Headphone 1 allows you to do a lot of work. The bad news is that this work is hard, especially if you don't have a measurement head. Now, you can share EQ presets with your buds or go online to find them. We have a first draft of one on our website. The problem is knowing how to tailor these things to what you like to hear and what you might be doing when you change the Q factor or level of your adjustment. Sony, on the other hand, makes it very easy. The bass goes up like a slope, so you have to make broadband, very wide general changes in order to get what you want. The main drawback here, though, is that Sony has a really big spike at 10 kHz that you cannot EQ away. It's very frustrating, believe me. However, out of the box, 9 people out of 10 are probably going to prefer the Sony over the Nothing Headphone 1. And we can take a look at this by observing what the multidimensional audio quality scores show us. Looking through the test results for the Nothing Headphone 1, we see that they get an overall score of 4.1. While it's foolish to say that anything within half a point is definitively better or worse than another, the Sony WH-1000XM6, on the other hand, gets a 4.8, which is, that's a significant difference. A lot of this rides on the fact that the bass is relatively where it should be, and the tuning is a lot less weird than the Nothing Headphone 1s. While both of these headphones can sound good, only one of them does sound good out of the box, and unless you really want to lose your mind tinkering to save a few bucks, you're just going to want to stick with the Sony if sound quality is what you care about. Well, it's frustrating to me to have to bring cost into this equation. I have to. The Nothing Headphone 1 is a full $150 cheaper than the Sony WH-1000XM6. And although the Sony headphones pretty much run the table against the Nothing Headphone 1, it's really hard to ignore that giant gulf in cost, and I'm not entirely sure that the extra money is worth it. Sure, you're getting something for that money. However, you can equalize issues with sound away. There are other options on the Nothing Headphone 1 that are not available on the Sony WH-1000XM6. While I highlighted comfort as an issue, it's not going to be an issue for most people. Really, the only thing I can say is that the Sony headphones are marginally better for those of you with glasses. So that's not really something that's going to apply to everybody. But if you are hard up for that kind of cash, there really aren't that many options on the market that perform as well as the Nothing Headphone 1 for the money. Really, our previous blend of best performance plus price is $400, the JBL Tour 1M3, and that's not really in this discussion, is it? So, with comparable features and comparable performance outside of the sound and a much lower price tag, I have to give this one to the Nothing Headphone 1, even if I personally would gravitate towards the Sony WH-1000XM6. If you can't get over sound quality, the Sony is the only choice here, but if price is your main driving concern, then Nothing wins outright. But if you're still not sold and you want to learn more about every positive and negative of the Nothing Headphone 1, click over here, where my colleague Adam goes over it in excruciating detail.